Okay, you got your timer?
I got the timer right here. Let's start, make sure we don't go over time. So, podcast episode number 2.
What is the title of this podcast?
So far I'm just calling it the Ramsey Dewey podcast because, on YouTube anyway, according to analytics, the most searched for term that leads people to my channel is my name, Ramsey Dewey. So I don't know who is out there looking for me in particular, but here I am. Here's my podcast.
Actually, you have mentioned that there are people looking for you, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not sure who's out there looking for me, but I'm right here. So listen up. We got a show for you.
Okay.
So today we got Ned here on the podcast. Ned, I don't actually know your last name. We've known each other for years, and I've never ever asked what your last name is.
It's Horsey.
Horsey.
Yeah, it's like a funny last name. It's like horse, but small. So if you imagine like a cute horse, you'd be like, Horsey, come here, little horsey.
That suddenly makes sense because you use Little Horse, Xiaoma is like a Chinese name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that worked out.
The things that you learn about people when you actually sit down to talk to them. Ned Horsey.
So true.
I had no idea. Anyway, I've known Ned for years actually, and we met at the weight room here at the
on the third floor, right?
Yeah.
Third floor weight room.
So if you are a fan of my YouTube channel and you're watching the video form of this podcast, we're in a conference room up here on the 6th floor of the Shuhui Gymnasium and Swimming Club in Shanghai, China. And you're probably used to seeing me in the gym over by the weights, by the boxing ring, doing stuff over there. We're upstairs from there. There is a weight room upstairs in the gymnasium, and I met Ned there. He was doing some lifting there, and I'm going to tell my version of Ned's story, and I'm going to allow Ned to tell his version.
Yeah, go ahead. I haven't heard you.
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. Ned was up there lifting. He saw me. He was watching me in the squat rack, and he asked me some questions, like just for a few simple cues. And I got to say, Ned was a pretty average-sized person back then, pretty average-strength person back then. And he asked me for some cues. I gave him some simple squat cues, like a basic 5x5 program, hinge your hips, track the knees forward, something like that, really simple stuff. And I got to say, nobody ever listens to fitness advice when I give it for free. They generally do if they hire me for private training or whatever, but nobody ever listens to fitness advice when I give it for free. And I didn't see Ned for a while. And I saw him sometime later, and he was quite a bit bigger, and he was squatting quite a bit more. And I said, Ned, what happened? What did you do? And he said, I took your advice. And since then,
I also ate a bunch of Big Macs. Like I experimented with the Big Mac diet, which, there are some drawbacks of that diet, but on the whole, it's not a terrible diet if you want to become larger.
Yeah. Now, part of my advice was to increase the number of calories that he was eating, and he absolutely did. And we did have this discussion about an article that I read where some scientists, I guess, those are people who do experiments, right? Some scientists, anyway, they got together and they were comparing and contrasting fitness supplements to McDonald's fast food, and they determined that athletes who supplemented with the fast food had comparable results to the athletes who supplemented with the supplements.
Totally, because, McDonald's fast food, it has a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of fat in it, because that's what makes you feel satiated, and it also creates kind of almost an addicting response. You eat fat, you want more fat. And they also have some protein, and that's what you need. You just need carbohydrates, fat, and protein,
Yeah. If you look at those commercial weight gainers, I mean, it's mostly maltodextrin, which is a carbohydrate, really cheap one, by the way, and, basic whey protein powder and a few other ingredients mixed in there.
Yeah, a commercial weight gainer, that's, to be honest, to me, that just is an odd product.
Isn't it though?
Yeah, because I get protein powder. I use protein powder because if you track your macros, not every day can you eat 220 grams of protein from, meat.
Ah.
You'll get to like 8 p.m. and you'll have been gorging yourself all day, and you've got like 400 calories left, and you need to consume another 70 calories of protein. It's not going to happen. So,
Indeed.
You measure out the protein powder, chug it down, try not to gag, and there you go.
As much as I love a nice piece of steak, it's hard to eat a whole bunch of those in one sitting, or just one after the other, after the other, after the other. I mean, it's the law of diminishing returns sets in pretty quick.
Yeah. That's why I got a barbecue, because I just find if you just barbecue it, you can basically eat unlimited whatever.
So going back to my version of Ned's story, he kept lifting, he kept training, and he went out on his own and did something very few people do. He started studying lifting technique, and he started gaining some knowledge and abilities that I couldn't even comprehend. Now he's squatting more than I can, and I couldn't be prouder of this guy, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I took a couple training sessions with you to work on my squat, and those were really helpful because, while you're not a power lifter, you've done fitness for years, and you think about, I want to say, kinesthetics. I mean, you think about physiology and movement, and when you're starting out, you have no idea what you're doing. Especially when you put some weight on your body, you have no idea what your body is doing. And so before I figured out that actually you need to film your workouts, working out with you was sort of one way to do that before I started filming, because, you have no idea, like, if you're doing something odd with your knees or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, what happened was I read the Starting Strength book, and that just made me think, gosh, everything we do in life successfully, we do because we research, we train, we try different things out, and we usually have some metrics to gauge our success, except fitness. I mean, it just seems like, people cannot be bothered to put even in a little thought about fitness. It's like very painful for them to think about it.
Metrics to gauge fitness. The first thing I thought of when you said that was CrossFit, and I imagine we're probably going to talk about that a few times today. But they often dub their CrossFit champions the fittest man or the fittest woman on earth, and it begs the question, what
is fitness?
Yeah, and how do you gauge that? Is this person, I mean, obviously they can throw weights around and do all that stuff and whatever, but
I've heard that CrossFit's changed. Like, in their CrossFit games, they have a lot of like gymnastics stuff and things like that. So, I mean, I wonder what the rationale for having that in their CrossFit games is, other than probably like season 1, they were like, okay, we're all doing weight training. Then season 2, they're like, okay, everyone's bored of weight training. Better find something else for them to do.
Yeah. Here's a hypothetical question along those lines. Who is a better athlete? The world's best swimmer or the world's best MMA fighter?
I mean, I would say neither.
Okay.
I would say go find a professional American football player. He's probably a better athlete than both of them. Why? Because that's the sport with the most money. So the genetic freaks who can, process oxygen at this crazy rate, who have some people just have a better nervous system. They can go from 0% effort to 100% effort in seconds. People like this, they're not messing around with MMA and swimming. They're going straight to the money, straight to the American football.
That is a fair point.
Yeah, but I mean, if the question is who could kick whose ass, I mean, obviously the MMA fighter, right?
Yeah, obviously, but
if it's kicking your ass in a pool, maybe the swimmer.
Maybe. So again, it's one of those questions to just get the wheels turning about how would you judge fitness? What is the metric? What is the rubric we're going to use to base fitness on? Is it how much we can lift, how fast we can move, how long our hearts keep beating until we die?
Yeah, I think that gets exactly to what I was going to ask you about today, because, there is a lot of vagueness about what constitutes fitness. And, if we think about, like, say you just walk into a Globo gym, you're going to be accosted by a customer service person who's probably received all of like 30 minutes of training, and they're going to try and get your fitness goals so they can sell you some personal training, and your fitness goals, if you're just wandering into a Globo gym, it's probably going to be, I want to be leaner, I want a six-pack, I want...
Or you're not going to know what you really want, and you're just going to say, I just want to maintain my muscle.
Maintain something, yeah. Yeah, and...
I want to remain exactly the same. That's why I'm going to a gym.
Yeah. So, I think that, you can see, like, no one knows what they want. No one knows what they're talking about. So if we were going to look at some fitness metrics that you can use to track your fitness... what's measurable? You could say, okay, how fast is your mile? How fast can you run a mile? Or 100 meters, or how fast can you swim a certain distance? Or how much do you squat? How much do you deadlift? Something like that. That's a measure of strength. MMA, it doesn't seem like you have many metrics there. It's more like who wins the fight and who doesn't. Yeah. And it seems... I don't know anything about MMA, but it seems like, you could, really be at the top of your game, but then, you just blow that fight mentally.
On any given day, any fighter could potentially lose, and there are so many variables in that. There are some super fit-looking guys who, fighters who look like bodybuilders, and in the gym they can perform, just through the roof with their abilities. But, at fight time, they might fight some skinny-looking dude who, on paper should probably get squashed, but, end up getting knocked out or whatever.
Yeah, well, we all watched Fight Club, and apparently those skinny guys are the ones you got to watch out for. But
for more than one reason.
So, what I want to talk about with you is basically... I believe that humans need to stop running. Okay?
Okay.
I think jogging is an abomination. I think that making children jog is the dumbest thing I've ever of all the stupid things you could make children do, why jogging, And
okay.
And basically I want to posit that strength and endurance are separate things. And frankly, this endurance, whatever this is maybe not important.
Okay.
I'd like your perspective from, in an MMA perspective, because I've taken some of your classes, and obviously there is some sort of endurance involved, because when you're sparring with someone for 3 or 5 minutes, Now,
this is a really controversial topic when it comes to mixed martial arts and combat sports in general, because traditionally, a lot of fighters, even MMA fighters, follow a kind of boxing tradition. And when I say boxing tradition, I mean the way boxers have trained for the last 100 years or so.
Right, which is in no way scientific. That's just tradition.
And that involves generally a lot of rope skipping and a lot of road work, which basically means jogging.
Road work.
Road work is what they call it.
It just sounds like they're building a highway.
Yeah. And there are plenty of great coaches and camps and all that who do these things, and they win fights and they're highly successful. But then you have guys like, say, Faraz Zahabi. He's the head coach at the TriStar Gym in Canada, famous for coaching George St. Pierre, multiple-time world champion in the UFC. And he will just straight up tell you that skipping rope is junk training. Because if you go to the gym, you've got a very limited amount of time to get your work done, your strength and conditioning done, your technique and sparring in.
Totally.
And if you spend 30 minutes skipping rope, doing some repetitive monotonous exercise like that one doesn't teach you anything except skipping rope and two.
I mean, your opponent is not going to throw a rope at you.
Definitely not. They're going to do something much worse, in fact.
So I would like to borrow a term from Mark Ripito, and I would like to call skipping rope and jogging LSD.
Okay.
Long, slow distance exercise.
Slow distance.
It's basically whatever people call cardio is long, slow distance. What does this mean? It means that this form of exercise, the individual movements are not hard. Therefore, they do not develop strength. What's hard about it is the volume. It's not hard to run 2 steps. Running 20,000 steps, that's hard. And that volume is what makes it difficult, okay? And so I think, just based on, full disclosure, in high school, I was on the long distance running team.
Hypocrisy.
I know.
It's okay, Ned. I used to train with my older brother for marathons. I never ran a marathon. He did, but I would train with him. And back in the day, I felt like that was a really important thing to do, especially for fitness. I
feel like we're good. After this podcast, there goes all the credibility.
But I don't feel that way anymore. Yes. And we'll get into that in a bit.
Certainly. So, basically, I think that endurance occurs at the expense of strength, because if we're going, first of all, like you said, you have a limited time frame for training. Yeah. So you can't, if you have junk exercise in there, you're not getting work done. And secondly, endurance exercise is, I want to say, catabolic. Basically, it creates a metabolic state where you're processing a lot of oxygen, and it's not developing lean muscle mass. It's in fact destroying it.
Absolutely. So, this is a scientific fact. Okay. Look it up.
So if you, and just from your own experience, look at the soccer moms who jog a lot, okay? They are lean, okay? They have got, you can see some ribs, I mean, they don't have a lot of fat on their bodies. That said, look at their upper thighs when they're running. They might shake a little, in the sense that it's not like they're pure muscle. They just are very lean. They're not necessarily strong. They're just very lean. And
it's a term I think a lot of people call skinny fat.
Skinny fat, yeah. I mean, I think most people who are not fat are skinny fat. And what's the problem with this? Well, I think that the issue, for me at least, with training is the reason that I want to get strong is because I want to be hard to kill, and I want to live to be strong and old and do everything I want to do when I'm old, and then just die of a heart attack while attempting to deadlift 600 pounds. I mean, I think that's how I'd like to wrap it up.
Awesome.
So basically, if you look at a long distance runner, now put an old person next to them. You're going to find a lot of scary similarities, okay? Long distance runners and old people, their arms and legs are skinny, okay? They don't have muscle in their arms and legs. Whereas a long distance runner, his core or her core is probably quite lean too. She doesn't have a tummy. But with old people, generally speaking, they have stick arms and legs, and then they either have, a chubby belly or they're lean as well. But the problem is when you're old and you're skinny and you're weak, this is when life starts breaking down. Getting off the toilet is a squat. Getting out of bed is rolling up to a sitting position and then squatting until you stand up. These movements require strength. There's no endurance required. I mean, at which point, do you see old people jogging? I mean, maybe it's in a tracksuit, they're doing that walking jogging thing. But I mean, we all know that's a waste of time. I mean, jogging will not help you when you're old. Whereas if you have some muscle, you're going to be able to do all the normal stuff you could do when you're younger. I mean, the difference between being young and being old is basically a hormonal one, and it means you'll lose some muscle mass, but if you build up muscle mass when you're young, you'll lose less, and if you have the habits of maintaining that, you should preserve strength. And
Indeed, and it's not just anecdotal. I mean, there have been studies, multiple studies performed with elderly people and strength training that have shown it not only improves quality of life, but life expectancy.
Yes. We were actually just talking about a British study. It was a metadata study with over 8,000 participants, men aged 20 to 80, and the conclusion of the study that when you control for, all sorts of things, smoking, drinking, heart disease, whatever, the strength is negatively correlated with mortality, and it is the strongest correlation with mortality, meaning as your strength reduces, your mortality increases. And anecdotally, we can see this. When you think of elderly people who are sickening, they generally are very weak. They can't perform basic functions that they need to survive, and so they need people to assist them. And then often that assistance is not necessarily very good, and they get into this spiral where they can't move, they get weaker, they can't move, they get weaker, and then we all know how that ends. So and so basically what I think is that endurance training gives you nothing. I mean, what it gives you is not strength. And
it gives you the ability to keep running or skipping rope or whatever the endurance activity is.
Right. But at the same time, I would also ask, sports medicine basically exists because of running. When you are doing high volume cardio, towards the end of your workout, you're exhausted. And at this point, your stride mechanics break down. You start dragging your feet. And that's when you hurt your knee, you hurt your hip, you get tendinitis. I mean, this is wear and tear on your body, and it's not even developing muscle mass that you can.
I could absolutely attest to this. Here's my personal experience with running. As I said before, I used to practice for marathons a lot with my older brother. I did a lot of running, a lot of distance running, and I looked like a human skeleton at the time, much like the figure Ned was describing.
Yeah, me too.
I was a skinny dude, man.
Yeah.
Still kind of am, but just less so. But as the years went on, I noticed distance running was beginning to damage my joints, my knees, my hips. I was developing tendinitis, exactly as Ned said, patellar tendinitis right under the knees. And now if I want to jog, and I got to say, I don't hate jogging. I find it's fun. I like to be able to move in all kinds of different ways. So if I have time, it's kind of neat to be able to get up and hop around or whatever. But after a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, it starts to grind on the joints, and I realize this is not a behavior that I can keep up throughout my life.
Yeah, I mean, you probably could look at that, and you might see, if you were to filming your jogging, when you start to feel this grinding, probably you're getting some fatigue and some part of your stride is breaking down. But think of everyone who's jogging. No one's doing that. They're just grinding down their hips and joints, and giving themselves repetitive motion injuries. That what are they going to do in your older life? You're going to have reduced mobility. You're going to have higher healthcare costs, because if you need a hip replacement, I mean, that don't come cheap. And
on top of that, I would say running shoes actually exacerbate the problem. They make it worse.
Oh, totally. Because if you look at, for example, like natural runners, there are these, isn't there the concept that some African hunting practices, the sort of endurance hunting, is like what all of our hominid ancestors were doing, and it's basically running barefoot with a pointed stick until an antelope keels over from heat exhaustion.
Yeah, and barefoot running is a totally different body mechanic than running with a padded running shoe on.
And also on a completely different surface. I mean,
Absolutely.
You're running on dirt, maybe some stone and dirt mixed together, whereas I'd say conservatively 95% of joggers are pounding pavement.
Yeah, they're going heel, ball, toe in the running shoes, whereas humans are, the most ergonomically correct way to do it is toe, ball, heel, which actually is more like a sprint than a jog. Sprinting is an activity I would definitely endorse, and I have my fighters do it all the time, because it's short, it's explosive, it translates to athletic performance as far as what you do in a cage fight, much more so than jogging.
Sure, it sounds like you're training that sort of neuromuscular response, that explosive response.
Exactly.
Also, the power clean, another way to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess what I wanted to ask is, which we've just gotten to, is does LSD have any place in MMA?
Just for anyone who might have forgot what LSD stands for.
Long, slow distance.
Slow distance.
Cardio. Does cardio have any place in MMA?
That is a great question. I am constantly asked, especially by new students. They come in, they spar or roll for a little bit, and they get really tired because their bodies have not acclimated to that specific activity yet. And they say, oh man, my cardio is really bad. What do I do to up my cardio? Should I jog? And that's the first thing they always ask. And I generally say, if you like to jog, sure, go ahead, but it's not going to make the kind of difference you want it to make for, say, jiu-jitsu or wrestling or kickboxing or mixed martial arts sparring. And they'll ask me, well, what do you do for cardio? And I say, well, if I'm doing jiu-jitsu, for cardio, I do more jiu-jitsu.
Well, I mean, I think that you can see the problem there is just that the conceptual framework around or training is, cardio is this thing, and we must all do it. And so where does that come from? I mean, I think it has to do with some sort of medical pseudoscience involving heart health. And so whenever someone feels tired or out of breath, they're like, oh, I've got my cardio's low, whereas, I might say, actually it's completely natural to feel tired and out of breath.
Yeah.
Because...
And it's also interesting that our conventional knowledge about cardio health, all this stuff, comes from the same era and the same understanding, and quite possibly even the same individuals who were endorsing the diets that were popular 20, 30, 50 years ago. For example, people saying saturated fat is bad for you. And now we understand saturated fats are anti-inflammatory and necessary and essential.
Yeah. I didn't know that, but I mean, I'm not surprised because, it's sort of the way medical knowledge diffuses into popular understanding. It's this slow, non-direct, weird process, I mean, I think fad diets is another podcast, but
definitely,
I'm pretty sure I could rant about that for about 40 minutes.
I think we should make it a goal to at least talk a little bit about fad diets in every single podcast. We did it for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes in the last one.
Okay.
Fad diets.
Fucking fad diets. So...
Don't do fad diets.
Don't do fad. Don't do fad diets. I mean...
I'm not a nutritionist, but people, since I work in a fitness-related profession, will constantly ask me for fitness-related advice, including diet.
Do you need to be a nutritionist to understand nutrition? I mean, it seemed like...
No, you don't.
Okay, slight rant, but it doesn't seem that complicated. Oh, gosh, I can't lose weight. Eat less calories.
Yeah. Eat a little less, move a little more, you will lose weight.
Yeah, I mean, if you... or just count your damn calories.
Or if you got the opposite problem, which I certainly did. Again, I was a skinny little skeleton of a man, and I struggled with that for a long time.
Yeah.
And one day I decided I want to nip this in the bud. I literally tripled my calories. I started counting what I was eating in a day, And I thought I was eating a lot because I was eating till I was full, and then past that I crammed as much food in my mouth as I could per meal. But when I finally counted the calories, I realized this isn't really that much.
You had a skinny stomach, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same realization because, you know, I read the Starting Strength book, and in the diet section, you know, Ripito is, you know, he's kind of, he likes to get on a soapbox and make a point very strongly. Sorry, that was a pop. And, you know, what he says is, you know, if you're going to build some muscle mass, why don't you eat 5,000 calories a day? I mean, can't hurt. You know, if you want to improve your strength, you need a calorie surplus. And given that, I don't know where he gets this number from, but he says something like, you know, 1 pound of muscle takes around 5,000 calories to create. You know, that means that if you're doing activities that recruit a lot of muscle, you need to eat a lot, way more than you think. And, you know, and you shouldn't be afraid of that, because I feel like people are kind of terrified of food.
But won't I get fat?
Yeah, it's like they feel like, oh my God, I'm going to lose control of my diet and then I'm going to get fat and that's it. You know, and it's kind of like, not really. I mean,
and especially if you stick to just basic whole food stuff that grows out of the earth or has a mother.
Yeah.
You know, without crazy, complicated, scientific sounding ingredients.
And no bubble tea. Okay? Bubble tea. Oh, just get a nice little bubble tea. It's like this big. You realize that's like 50% sugar. I mean, you can dissolve so much sugar in liquid. It is incredible. You know, and so everyone's like, oh gosh, why am I getting so fat? I'm going to the office with my bubble tea. Yeah, it's because that's like 900 calories. Okay.
Ned, could you explain the concept of bubble tea for our non-Chinese, outside of the People's Republic viewers?
Okay, so basically in the West, we are comfortable eating sweet things. We'll eat cookies, cake, ice cream. In China, for some reason, Chinese people are convinced that they do not like sweet things. And, you know, you give your Chinese friend a cookie, and they'll just be like, oh, tai tian le, too sweet, oh. And then they will go and they will get a cup of tea that is this big with maybe a little ice in it, and it is like 50% sugar syrup. And they will just gulp it down. Because drinking syrup is just culturally okay, but a sweet cookie is like, you know, just imperialism.
Oh, yeah. And some of the Chinese desserts, like the traditional desserts, aren't even actually sweet to a Western palate. Like a popular dessert here is red bean paste. And if you're not familiar with it, it is about as sweet as refried beans you might put in a taco if you're from the southwest of the U.S.
Maybe with like a little powdered sugar on top of those refried beans, but
okay,
yeah,
maybe it's just slightly sweeter than refried beans. But a lot of Chinese people say, "Oh, that is too sweet. I cannot eat it. I cannot put it in my mouth and process it. It's just too much sweetness."
Though, I mean, palates are changing. You know, if you look around the People's Republic today, I'd say 80% of children are overweight, and I think, I mean, maybe you have a different view, but
80% of children.
Yeah, I think they're overweight.
I would say this upcoming generation is definitely fatter than the previous generation. Now, are we talking like American fat or Chinese fat? Because there's a substantial difference.
Okay, so on the subject of American fat versus Chinese fat, do you know that in terms of nominal figures, China has more obese people than America? Though I think we win in terms of like morbid obesity.
Yeah, definitely. If you look around at a big crowd here in China, and you'll see lots of them because it's the world's most populated country, and you're from America where you're used to seeing just large numbers of huge people who are just morbidly obese, you don't see much of that. I've probably seen just a handful of really fat people here in China in the whole time I've lived here.
But basically everyone's getting a little more fluffy around the middle because, you know, they're getting into a Western lifestyle where you go to the office for 9 hours a day, you're playing on your phone constantly, there's no physical activity, you get takeout for lunch delivered directly to your office so you don't even walk outside. this takeout's full of oil. You drink a bubble tea, so basically,
physical culture is pretty much dying with the upcoming generations here.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at the old folks in China, they're always up and out doing tai chi or ballroom dancing or walking backwards and
Right.
clapping or something weird or doing the splits out in front of everybody.
Which is LSD. It's all long, slow distance exercise.
Yeah.
Um,
But they're up and moving.
they are moving,
So-
so they're not fat, but they're weak. I think I've seen, I don't know, in 5 years in China, I've seen, 2 or 3 guys who looked pretty strong,
Yeah, if you go to the weight room on the 3rd floor, there's this old dude who's like always doing curls and stuff, who's got
That-
pretty lean,
Yeah.
big, stacked upper body there.
That guy would actually bully me.
And he's always there.
And always turning the TV on to like some super loud thing, and then you're just like, hey, can I turn this down? He's like, well, you gotta be considerate of other people. And I'm like, yeah, you got this at up to 11, Gosh. Anyway, so point is, are we on diets or?
Oh wow, we kind of bounced around there a little
Yeah.
bit. Let's consult the notes, man.
Okay.
Ned went to the trouble of writing some notes here.
So basically, my first note was strength versus endurance. Who wins? Okay, I want to ask you,
Okay.
as an MMA guy,
Yeah.
what if we have a fighter, and he's never seen a jump rope, but he punches the bag, he lifts weights, and then he's fighting someone who does road work, laying bricks, and and does some bag punching, and maybe he does some curls in the gym, and they're a similar weight.
Okay.
Who are you going to put your money on? Or
Are we assuming they have comparable fighting technique?
I guess so. I mean,
Maybe
it's,
2 guys trained with the same trainer. They all know the same moves, but one focuses more on strength training. The other one
yeah.
does the road work and rope skipping. Okay. In that case, I would probably bet on the strength athlete.
Okay. Because
And I know a lot of people on the internet listening to this will probably be typing furiously, but simply because of my personal experience training with really strong people is the understanding that strength is the precedent for athletic performance. And not just how much you can lift or how much you can move around or how much you can push or squish people, but it is the precedent for speed, the precedent for agility, the precedent for all of these athletic attributes, power, obviously, that contribute to winning fights.
power being strength times speed. So this is also a note. Are you saying that developing strength also develops your neuromuscular response, meaning your ability to recruit strength, your ability to make your muscles push hard?
Yes, I would. Strength, like I said, is the precedent for power.
Right.
Now, there is going to be a difference, a notable difference in, say, how much I am able to squat and how fast I am able to move that bar up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because one of those things is different than the other. How quickly I can move the weight is going to translate into athletic performance for MMA much more notably, much more importantly than simply how much weight I can struggle to push up in slow motion.
Yeah. Yeah. But it sounds like we're describing the same formula, which is strength times speed equals athletic performance.
There you go.
So, what's easier to train, strength or speed? Strength. The answer is strength.
Yeah. The whole reason I got into fighting in the first place, the whole reason I got interested in martial arts is because I got bullied and I simply was not fast enough to run away from the bullies. And in spite of many decades of athletic training, I really haven't gotten much faster. Stronger, yes. Faster, no.
I mean, it seems like speed is sort of genetically determined. Like your vertical jump, right?
Yeah, it has a lot to do with basically how long your limbs are. And I mean, there are some other factors, and we can make our athletic performance better to an extent, but we can't replace the length of our limbs and increase the amount of leverage we have to apply when sticking our foot on the floor to push off and jump or whatever we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So I think that ties all the way back to the beginning, which is when I started training and we started talking, I thought I just realized, you know, if I'm gonna spend any time in the gym, let's create some metrics that I can track. And for me, the easiest metrics were my squat, deadlift, bench press, overhead press, power clean, barbell row. You know, if those weights are going up, then I'm getting stronger, and therefore I'm probably getting more athletic, but that wasn't as important to me.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, because I've already outlined my plan to, you know, live until 80 and then die while deadlifting. So
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, nice and clean.
Put that on his tombstone. Died while deadlifting.
Yeah. I mean, there's some great stories of, you know, there was that Icelandic guy who, you know, had a heart attack while deadlifting 800 pounds. That said, he actually had a congenital heart condition. So, you know, the 800-pound deadlift, you know, who knows if it contributed. But
we all got to go sometime, so you might as well go doing something awesome.
Totally. Why not do something awesome? So next time you look at the treadmill or you look at the squat rack, make the right choice.
Exactly.
Another thing you mentioned about strength in MMA has to do with agility and balance. So my personal experience is that the stronger you are, the better your balance.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. Now, you probably heard the term functional fitness or functional training or something like that, which is one of the most abused and misused terms in the fitness industry.
I briefly saw red when you said it.
Yeah, because when people say functional fitness, they're usually talking about balancing on a Bosu ball or a Swiss ball or some unstable surface or a little balance board.
Drop a 45-pound plate on that stupid Bosu ball. Like, what are you actually helping this person do?
Yes, and what function is that?
Roll your ankle? I mean, yeah, they might roll their ankle. That's, you know, functionally what could happen.
None of that is functional, because what function are we training? None. We're training a circus act.
Do you live in a bouncy castle?
Yeah, exactly. Unless your sport is bouncy castle rugby or something like that, then the Bosu ball doesn't really apply to functional fitness. What is functional for an athlete is being able to stabilize on flat ground on your feet.
Right.
And I'm not just talking out of my butt. I actually have some certification in this area. I've got a barefoot training certification under Dr. Emily Spinktel. That is her last name. Weird as it sounds.
I was about to ask.
I went to a whole seminar for that. But, you know, even if I didn't, it's very important to understand we perform athletically with our feet on the ground. You know, even if your sport is jumping, that all starts from basing those feet on the ground, on a flat surface.
You will never encounter a Bosu ball in the wild.
So, yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to say the most functional training you can do is having your feet on the ground and lifting something heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, because to begin with, you know, like as someone who's been squatting for a couple of years now, you know, you think, okay, I'm going to squat this weight. And then you look at the video, you know, you're on your heels, then you're on the ball of your feet. I mean, you're just floating around. You don't really know what's going on. But then once that weight gets up pretty heavy and you're squatting, you know, 1.1 times your body weight, 1.2 times your body weight. Like now, every time you squat that, you're thinking like, God, I really don't want to get off balance, because if this weight comes off my back, it's going to like, you know, maybe dislocate my forearm. I mean, it's going to be a mess. And suddenly you're really, really careful about your balance, and you're right over your midfoot. You're right over your core. I mean, it's like you shift a millimeter and you're like, oh, okay, I can feel that. I'm going to go back to the midfoot, you know, And that's something you don't expect. You know, you think, you see some huge power lifter and you don't think, that guy, great balance.
You don't until you try to take them down with a single leg or a double leg takedown. You met Big Dave, right?
Yeah,
Did you ever grapple with him in the jiu-jitsu class ever?
No. I mean, that's not an ironic nickname.
He's a big dude.
That's
he's
a descriptive nickname.
And he's stronger than he looks. The guy's like 110 kilos.
Only 110?
Only 110, which is kind of shocking because I've grappled with a lot of much heavier people. Much heavier people, as heavy as like over 200 kilos. And none of them had the type of strength and balance and just control on the mat as this guy. I asked him like what kind of numbers he was pushing up, on the squat, how much he's pulling on the deadlift and so on, and they were just huge numbers. And I was like, whoa, there must be some type of correlation between being able to lift giant weights and being able to firmly root yourself in the ground so tiny people can't budge you when they try to take you down.
Well, totally. I mean, that ties into your whole self-defense video debunking thing, because, self-defense is really easy when no one's applying any force against you,
Yeah.
You can demonstrate, a self-defense technique, but the moment, you've demonstrated, you start applying a little bit of force, nothing works.
Everything works against a compliant training partner.
Except for the butt one. Remember that butt? It's like they're running up to you, and then you just hit them with your butt and run away.
Got to watch my aerobic self-defense video for the context here.
Yeah.
It's like the one technique we tried out that actually worked.
And it's basically like just like a booty call. I mean, it's like a really aggressive booty call.
Punch the bad guy with your butt if they try to grab you from behind. Totally works. Weird as it sounds. But actually this ties into the squat because basically your butt, your glutes it's one of the largest chunks of muscle in your body. And shall we move into why people do cardio because they think it'll make them lose weight? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. So I tried to get my father to squat at the gym, and with some limited success. I mean, I went with him, and we got in the squat rack, and, his form was a little wishy-washy, and we worked on that. But the moment I left, he stopped squatting because, he found it, like, a little scary, and he started... He always mentioned to me, I'm just doing some machines and then doing sit-ups and working on my core. And I finally asked him, why are you working on your core? Why are you doing sit-ups? And he said, well, I've got a little bit of a gut, so I was thinking if you develop some muscle there, it kind of sucks it all in. And I had to think about that because that is, I guess that maybe makes some sort of intuitive sense. But I'm pretty sure that is completely incorrect.
Yeah, we have this tendency to think if I feel the burn right here, then that's going to spot reduce the fat there or something like that. That's absolutely not correct.
Yeah. Now,
if we feel the burn in a specific spot, then that means a certain muscle group is engaging. It's becoming engorged with blood. It's moving. But we don't spot reduce fat.
Yeah. And if you want to burn a lot of calories, we talked about before that the muscle protein synthesis, the process of synthesizing new muscles out of protein, is incredibly calorie. It consumes a lot of calories, and so, given that, rather than jogging on the treadmill for 45 minutes, which, at a moderate pace will burn you, 400 calories, 500 calories?
I was thinking maybe 300, but
300?
Somebody in the comments section is going to fact check that.
Okay.
And they're going to say, you guys were wrong.
Okay, but maybe we're wrong, but is that basically a can of Coke? Is it basically a Coke? So you're You're going to spend an hour at the gym and you're going to burn off a can of Coke. What if you get thirsty on the way home and you drink a can of Coke? Oh no, today's been a loss.
Or a bubble tea.
Oh my God. Don't even look at that bubble tea. So instead, try this. Let's recruit as much muscle mass as we can and push that, like induce enough stress in that muscle mass to start the muscle protein synthesis process. And that is the squat, because the squat recruits your hamstrings, your glutes, your lower back, your core. I mean, everything's working on it.
Quick question, Ned. If you could only do 3 exercises for the rest of your life, what would they be?
Well, one would be the squat because, it's the king of the lifts. And, personally, the squat is my worst part of the week. If I'm going to be squatting, that is the worst thing that's going to happen to me that week. And in that way, because it's so hard, you just feel like you're dying. And it involves getting under a bar that you're looking at that bar and it's bending, the bar's got a curve in it, and you're just like, what the hell am I doing with my life? And you go and you do that, and then afterwards you're like, you know what am I so afraid of about it, all this stuff? I can just, if I just did that, I can go and, tell my boss to insert statement there. So yeah, I mean, I would do, if I could only do 3, it would probably be squat, definitely deadlift, and then probably bench,
Okay.
Those are, because those lifts recruit a lot of muscle. The deadlift's basically a reverse squat, and the bench, you want to get something in the upper body. Curls, by the way, are for girls.
Curls for the girls.
No. For girls.
For girls. There's a difference. Curls for the girls is doing curls to try to impress the ladies.
Curls, I think, are for girls. Little anecdote. I was working out with my girlfriend, and she's really interesting because when we started working out, her bench press was higher than her squat, which, we're not talking huge weights, but that's interesting because,
I actually had the same experience when I started squatting.
Okay.
I thought, well, clearly my legs are much bigger than my arms, so I should be able to squat more than I can bench press, but I found I was just falling apart in the midsection. The upper body just wasn't supporting the weight.
Exactly. Basically, when you do a big lift like that, if you have one small supporting muscle group that's like basically helping you maintain proper form, when that fails, the whole thing doesn't work. And as we worked her bench up, she was really having trouble maintaining tightness in her upper body. And that's when we thought, hey, maybe the issue is because as a woman, no one's encouraging you to do any kind of weight training. And so basically the upper body, the triceps, biceps are just a little underdeveloped. And so, women starting out, in addition to doing the big lifts, maybe do some curls,
Yeah, that's interesting how you mentioned that women are not encouraged basically at all to get strong. And it's a shame because, women have, and I'm just going to say this, women have the potential to be much, much, much stronger than most of them think they do. And I've seen this again and again. I always do strength training with all of my athletes, many of whom are women. And a lot of them are shocked at how much weight they are able to lift after a relatively short amount of time, 6 months to a year.
Totally. My girlfriend has squatted with me 5 times, and this weekend as we were moving apartments, she was picking up heavy boxes and remarking, wow, this is incredible. I couldn't move this before. She moved a table by herself, and she had that carried into her house by 2 men previously. So it's really interesting what people are capable of when they have a goal. And this, new thing to mention is when you're training, you might as well have a goal, because I think that's a real issue with the sort of, it's New Year's, you get a gym membership, you go to the gym for 2 weeks, you don't have a goal, you don't have direction, you get bored.
Yeah, and this is something I deal with all the time with new students. They come into my gym often because it's a fun sounding alternative to just aimlessly going into a weights and treadmills gym with no goal. Because combat sports gym immediately gives you a goal, learn how to win a fight. They're like, this is fun, this is exciting. It's not like going to the weights and treadmills gym where I just feel like I'm wasting my time. I love lifting weights. I love being in the gym and moving and doing all this stuff. And it is because I have a goal to get stronger so I can get better at fighting and teaching people how to win fights. And I love that. But yeah, you have to have a goal. You have to attach your activity to a purpose.
Otherwise, it's literally meaningless.
Yeah.
So,
even if that purpose is as shallow as just looking good for the ladies with those giant biceps and pecs.
You just want to be cut. That's a goal. Yeah. So, I mean, I've just got a big list of things that strength training, benefits of strength training.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we could go through them, but like, you kind of, you know them all. I mean,
yeah, well, one thing I was thinking about, we touched on it at the beginning, was the regiment of a fighter. And I'm not talking about an amateur hobbyist guy who works full-time and comes in and trains for a couple hours 2 or 3 times a week. I mean an actual professional fighter, because a lot of people are confused about that. Man, did it just get a lot darker in here?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So if you're listening to the audio-only version, it just got a lot darker on here, and we don't have any lights on. But anyway, professional fighter, a lot of people think that they spend all day long training and training and training and training, and that's not actually true. If you are training the way you should, essentially you're doing a 2-a-day split. What that means is that for 90 minutes to 2 hours, either in the morning or the afternoon, you are going to do either a strength and conditioning session, or you are going to do a technique and sparring session. And either in the afternoon or the evening, you are going to do the other one, strength or conditioning or technique and sparring. So essentially every day you're doing 90 minutes to 2 hours of strength and conditioning, 90 minutes to 2 hours of technique and sparring. So ultimately it's 3 to 4 hours of training a day. And the rest of the time, in the words of my favorite boxer of all time, Jack Dempsey, you do a lot of loafing around.
And eating, I imagine.
And eating, yes. Tons and tons of eating.
Yeah, because recovery is where you get strong. You don't get strong from the workout. You get strong by doing a workout and then recovering properly.
Yeah.
Which means sleep and food.
Here, Ned, you keep talking. I'm going to try to turn the brightness up on the screen just a second.
Okay. Well, given... okay, so we mentioned fad diets before. And oh wait, you're back. I was going to go on a rant.
Go ahead.
No, we should go back to this 2-day split. So basically, you're saying that a professional fighter, you know, they'll have a morning session and an evening session in total, maybe 4 hours a day. Yeah. And when you say 2-day split, do you mean that on the next day they rest?
No. I mean, this is something they're doing every day.
So now, when do they recover? You know, if they're doing...
Well, one addendum to that. My personal thing that I do is 6 days on, 1 day off. 6 days on, 1 day off. So the rest is it's essentially you work to a state that you can do it again the next day. So if you're doing sparring, you're not going to do full contact fighting most of the time, because you need to be able to get up and do it again.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sparring full contact, you're not going to be able to spar full contact again the next day unless you're sparring with schmucks.
Right.
If you are lifting yourself to the point where you are just completely fatigued and your muscles are so sore you can't move, there's no way you can do strength and conditioning the next day.
If you're hitting, you know, PRs, personal records.
Yeah, so there has to be periodization there.
Yeah, for sure. So for my strength training program, I'm currently still doing, after 2 years, I'm still doing the starting strength novice progression. And what that means is it's a 3 days on, 2 days off program where you have a day in between each training session, and in each training session you do maximum four lifts. You always squat. Your second exercise, you alternate between the overhead press and the bench press, and for your third exercise, it's either the deadlift, power clean, or barbell row. Basically, the power clean's pretty hard, so if you're a dummy like me, barbell row's fine. Basically, you try to hit a PR every workout, then you rest for a day, and then you try to hit a PR on the next workout. And as you get towards the end of this Novice progression, because obviously even if you're only adding half a pound to the bar each session, this really builds up. You work out for 2 months straight, you don't miss a workout. That's 24 workouts. If you're adding a pound to the bar, that's 24 pounds to your squat. That's a big jump. That's another plate on there. So towards the end of the Novice progression, basically your ability to recover, you don't have enough time to recover between workouts. So what you do is now, you have a heavy, light, heavy, and then maybe light, heavy, light. I mean, you start alternating to kind of, accumulate stress and then PR. And then eventually you move into intermediate programming where instead of accumulating stress over a week, now you're accumulating stress over 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, then 4 weeks. Doesn't that sound like fun? I don't think it is.
Accumulating stress.
Yeah. Basically, you're dosing yourself with stress to provoke a muscular adaptation.
Yeah. One of the brilliant things about the human body is that we will adapt to the demands we put on our body.
So if the demand you're putting on your body is a shuffling jog for 2 miles, your body's going to adapt to that mediocrity.
Yeah, and all jogging is just falling and then catching yourself, and falling and then catching yourself with your foot before you face plant, basically.
Right, which, when you put it that way, doesn't sound very sexy. I don't think anyone cares, whereas if you're, maybe you're bench pressing some crazy number, mention that at the bar. You might get a response.
People are going to want to see proof, man.
They're going to be like, no way. Take your shirt off.
All the bros at the bar are going to want to... I never go to bars, actually, so I don't know what happens in a bar, to be honest. I just... My entire perception of bars comes from movies and television and Hollywood, and so I just assume people are always smashing bar stools over each other's head and fighting with cue sticks.
And wearing cowboy hats. They still wear cowboy hats.
And wearing cowboy hats, exactly.
Yeah. Right. And they're called saloons.
Precisely. The only time I ever went to a club, like a nightclub, it was back when I was kickboxing, because they would hold kickboxing events in nightclubs. And it's kind of a weird situation. Like I don't drink for personal and religious reasons and all that, but I would go to these nightclubs to fight. I'd get up in the ring and fight, and then afterwards, we're going way off topic here, but this is a story I want to tell.
This is great.
People would come up and they'd be totally drunk, and there's something about watching people fight live, especially that it makes you feel a little empowered, like, yeah, this is awesome, maybe I can do that too. And when your sense of judgment is impaired, a lot of people think, yeah, I can kick that dude's butt who just did that spinning hook kick in that dude's head and knocked him out.
So they're just sneaking up on you and hitting you with beer bottles and
Fortunately,
stuff?
that never happened, but I did have a guy who wanted to fight me after a fight. I went up there, I just want to fight. He came over and he's like, dude, I can take you. I was like, I'm going to be over on the other side. I'm going to collect my check. I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's my bar experience in real life.
I'd say that's pretty representative, Ramsey.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically every night at the bar, right, guys? You go there, you engage in a cage fight. On the way to pick up your check, someone tries to start a fight. You grab your cowboy hat and a bar stool.
You smash a pool stick over his head.
Right. It's just pandemonium.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, it's funny that your wholesome experience of a bar is, getting paid to beat someone up, and then
Most people do that for free, man. I tell you, fighting is a weird profession compared to other professions for a lot of reasons, and one of those reasons is that fighting is something people do for free at their own risk all the time, especially if they're drunk. I get a lot of people in the comments of my YouTube channel talking about street fights, and my channel is not about street fights at all. I mean, I'm a combat sports coach. I teach people to win fights in the context of mixed martial arts. And yet they're always asking me for street fight advice. Whoa, does this work in the street? Does that work in the street? Cars work in the street, guys.
Yeah, it's hard to beat a car.
You never see an accountant going out there in the streets and just filing people's taxes for free. Hey, you, get over here. I forget what American tax forms are called.
Yeah, here's a 1040.
Yeah, let me see your 1040s. This joke fell flat because I've been in China so long I don't remember American culture.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is if someone approaches you and wants to fight, you're like, whoa, I'm not on the clock, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pony up some cash and then maybe we can talk.
Right. Well.
Now, I had another thought going back to fitness and all that. When we were talking about eating and eating enormous amounts of food and cardio, I think
this is making me so hungry.
I know. There are so many restaurants just outside. But a lot of people who complain about cardio, like, oh, my cardio is not very good, after attempting an intense athletic activity like mixed martial arts, sparring, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, etc., that they'll get tired and they'll gas out and so on. But what I see happening a lot is they are simply not getting enough calories on a regular basis to build up the energy stores necessary to do this type of activity.
Yeah,
often, not always.
And probably the wrong type of calories.
Yes.
Pizza's delicious, but it's mostly fat, so you need carbs for energy.
Yes,
and you
complex
also
carbohydrates.
You need a lot of protein if you want to get big muscles. At least 200
a healthy
grams.
dose of saturated fats.
Yeah, and fats to make you feel good. If there's no fat in your diet, you're going to be miserable, and everyone's going to know it. So, yeah. Actually, that reminds me, I think the last time we were in this room, you said, you want to eat vegan? Here's some grass-fed beef.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been thinking about that ever since. Yeah.
The most vegan food on the planet, and this is probably going to start some controversy, is grass-fed beef. Now, I come from a small town, a small farming community in southwest Idaho. It's called New Plymouth. It's shaped like a horseshoe. It's a couple of streets on the inside and a bunch of farms and fields on the outside. And everything there is done the same way it was, 200 years ago. We still have water wheels, for example, to irrigate farms in part of the town. And all the beef is, free range there. You see the cows out there. There are no factory farms. I didn't even know what a factory farm was until I moved out of my hometown and I realized, the rest of America doesn't operate like New Plymouth, Idaho, population 800. And when I was born, I think it's like 1,300 now.
So is
30,000 cows.
Is New Plymouth accessible via time machine, or how do you, is that?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Well, even if you took a time machine there, you'd still see, Mennonite people in a horse-drawn carriage.
Oh,
yes, you still see that on the streets today.
Oh.
You'll see, people wearing their cowboy hats and their riding boots, walking around town.
Heading to the saloon.
Yeah, there is an actual saloon with those old-timey push doors. That's
there's just a.
It's over 100 years old.
There's just a warehouse full of pool cues next to it because they go through them so fast.
Yeah, my hometown, the main street, looks very much like one of those old Western movies because it was an old Western town. I mean, it's a cowboy town.
Right, and explain why tofu is murder. Okay,
let's talk about this. So, again, the rest of the world doesn't operate like this small rural community. Over 40% of the land, the total land in the United States, is used for agriculture. And I know a lot of vegans on the internet are probably chiming in like, yeah, and a lot of that is used to grow crops to feed animals, which you shouldn't eat or whatever. And yeah, there is some of that.
Animals would eat you if they could.
There is. We'll get into that in a minute, I think.
Don't get me started on cats.
Cows kill more people than sharks. Cows kill more people, twice as many people as wolves every year.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I read a.
That's why we need to keep them unarmed.
Yes, cows actually kill more people than wolves and sharks combined every year.
And pigs kill more people than sharks every year, but I don't know if...
And so do horses.
Yeah. Oh, horses are just deadly.
Yeah. Man, I grew up, we had a rodeo arena right next to my house. I actually competed in rodeo as a child, did mutton busting and
rodeo.
Yeah,
wow.
Steer riding and that sort of thing. And as soon as it was time to...
your parents were like, that's a good idea.
Shockingly, yeah. My mom wouldn't let me play sports in high school, wouldn't let me do football or wrestling or anything like that because I might get hurt, and yet riding
rodeo.
On a wild farm animal, totally fine.
Well, basically you have two types of injury in rodeo, right? Like paralysis and death.
Pretty much. I saw a guy get stomped to death by a bull in my hometown, right next to my house. Yeah, it's serious stuff. So, man, hats off to rodeo folks out there. That is scarier
hardcore.
Than cage fighting in a big way.
That is hardcore, yeah.
So, like I said, when it came time, when they said, hey, you want to train to ride a bull, I was like, nope.
Nope, I'll go back to the safe cage and fight anyone who comes in for money.
So anyway, 40% of the land in America is used for agriculture. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with growing plants to eat? We need them, right? We need to eat. People need to eat. And there are a lot of people.
I mean, growing plants is natural, right?
It seems that way. It seems that way, right? But the thing is, when we plant crops, we have to destroy an entire ecosystem. We rip up the ground, and we kill everything there. We kill untold numbers of insects, like trillions of them. We kill moles, voles, rats, gophers. Man, I used to help a friend of mine trap gophers on his farm back in the day, and I remember having a thought like, man, we kill so many animals in order to grow plants. What if we just ate the animals? And that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, gophers, I mean, there's not a lot of meat on a gopher,
Gophers are
right?
not as tasty as cows and chickens, for example.
Yeah, I mean...
And grasshoppers are probably... I've never eaten a grasshopper.
I had a grasshopper here, actually. Yeah,
I've had cicadas. I imagine it would probably be similar.
Yeah, the grasshopper's like a little too big, so it's like it doesn't have that crunchy thing like the cicada. It's sort of like a little too wet.
Cicadas are super crunchy. They taste kind of like really prickly shrimp.
Yeah, I mean...
That you can't take the shell off of.
That actually sounds like a great protein, because they're pure protein, right?
Yeah.
So, like, instead of potato chips, you have your cicada whatever.
Yeah. And cicadas in Shandong province here in China, they're a very popular dish. And, yeah, here in China, they'll pretty much eat anything. If it moves, if it's edible, they'll find a way to eat it. And I think...
And just a note for our American viewers, that's not racist. That's descriptive. They will... Ask a Chinese person in China anything. Will you eat that? They'll probably say yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's I've eaten some fascinating things here in China. Like
there's no wildlife here because it was eaten.
You ever watch that show, Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern?
No,
where he goes across the world and tries all this weird stuff. And from an American perspective, where like the fanciest meat you ever eat is like chicken and beef and maybe once in a while pork or lamb. And he's out there eating like bull testicles or whatever, which they actually eat in Idaho, Rocky Mountain oysters. But here in China, yeah, I've eaten cicadas, starfish, spiders, scorpions.
Snakes, frogs.
Snakes, yes, frogs. Frogs are delicious, by the way.
Frogs are very cheap protein, too.
Yeah, I really do enjoy frogs. And they all kinds of interesting animals we would never even think of eating in the United States, and a lot of people would turn their noses up at. And it just really got me thinking about this. Like, we kill so many untold numbers of animals, like essentially mass genocides. Genocide's the wrong word. Gena means people. Specieside. Anyway, we just mass murder huge numbers of animals.
It's industrial because you're cutting a whole swathe of virgin land.
And that's just 1 acre of crops.
Yeah.
And what would happen if we just ate the animals instead? I mean, that would be more humane. You can't argue about that. And I have a lot of vegan friends and vegan followers on the internet who have argued with me on these points and say, well, veganism, it's not about never doing anything that results in the death of an animal. It's about reducing the harm that you do. And that's great. That's admirable. But if that really is the goal, wouldn't it be better to essentially just eat a smaller number of the animals we're murdering in mass rather than just killing them off so we can feel better about ourselves by eating plants?
Right, which brings you to grass-fed beef, because if the cows are grazing there and the local ecosystem is maintained, it's not actually that disruptive. There's not so much, destruction of ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's delicious. It's delicious. It's full of protein. Yeah.
Another one of the big problems with agriculture, the way it's done in America and most other parts of the world, is that farmers never let their fields go fallow. And if you didn't grow up in an agricultural community like me, what that means is essentially you stop planting crops there for a year. You just let it go wild again. You let the animals and the plants come back and grow as they naturally would and re-fertilize the earth and rejuvenate itself. And so when you grow crops again, they grow better and more nutritious food. And when we don't do that, essentially what we have is soil depletion. And I read a fascinating study a few years ago comparing the nutritional content of today's crops to the nutritional content of the same crops like 50 years ago.
How would you even know? I mean...
Well, if you're like my grandma was, you would have a food storage with canned foods from like the 1950s, 1940s, like these antique cans and whatnot.
Gosh.
So that stuff still does exist. You can buy some of this on eBay, for example. And you can test that. You can test the nutritional content of canned food, for example, from decades ago.
So food used to be more nutritious?
Yeah. What they found, for example, an apple from 1950 was like 10 times more nutritious than an apple from the present day. So essentially, to get the same amounts of vitamins and minerals in an apple, you'd have to eat like 10 of them to get the same content from a single apple from the 1950s because of soil depletion.
Wow. Well,
but along with that, you're getting essentially empty calories, all this extra sugar and whatnot.
Well, if we're okay, so great segue back into lean muscle mass, because one health concern that a lot of people have is, a lot of people in China, actually China has the world's largest pre-diabetic population. And, dealing with, if you're pre-diabetic or you're concerned about that, actually increasing lean muscle mass increases your body's ability to process glucose and process sugars. And so, to increase, basically being diabetic is one of those indicators that really affects your mortality. And so, am I really white now?
Yeah, I'm going to adjust the contrast. Keep talking, man.
Okay. So, so basically you really want to avoid, developing this sort of condition, because it has a huge effect on your mortality and your quality of life. And, there's some research that that effectively demonstrates that one way to really, if you really want to just be able to eat what you want and not have to worry about this sort of pre-diabetic condition, you need to increase your lean muscle mass, because lean muscle mass burns calories, processes sugars, does all sorts of good stuff. You don't want skinny fat. You don't want to just be, you don't want to be jiggly. You want to get some lean muscle mass.
I'm going to say strength is not just the precedent for athletic performance. It is the precedent for quality of life.
Because strength is the thing we use to interact with our environment. Everything you do, from opening the car door to carrying groceries to, moving a lawnmower, this is all strength. If you can't do these things, you need to pay someone to do them or have someone do them for you, and that makes you dependent and ornery. That's no good.
Indeed. I mean, you need strength just to be able to breathe. I mean, I've had multiple abdominal surgeries back in my early 20s, and it left me with this giant scar on my stomach. And when they cut you open, and when your abdominals muscles are severed, it is impossible to do normal stuff. And all that stuff you took for granted, like just being able to breathe, becomes this tremendous chore.
Gosh.
And I'm going to tell a quick story about my grandma. The way she died, she ended up with succumbing to osteoporosis. Basically, her skeleton would hunch over itself, and we need strength. We need muscle in order to support the weight of our own bones. And if we do not have that, essentially, what happened is her rib cage collapsed on itself, crushed her organs, and unfortunately, her very last words were the pain, the agony. And
Good God, that's like Heart of Darkness.
I know, right? So when we were joking about, and not necessarily joking about the best way to die is doing something awesome. Yeah, it totally is. Would you rather die deadlifting something heavy looking awesome in the gym, or, struggling to breathe because you didn't have the muscular strength to lift up your own bones?
Sure. I mean, it's an easy decision when you phrase it, when you frame it that way. I mean, and on to bones, if you are, female, and if you are past the age of 40, you're going to start to be concerned about bone density. Well, first of all, everyone should be, but in particular, women over the age of 40.
Yeah.
And
at this point, I imagine somebody in the comments is probably typing, well, doesn't distance running increase bone density?
No. Because, well, first of all, distance running is weight bearing only in the sense that you are bearing your body weight. So you can't overload to do distance running. Maybe if you were wearing a weighted vest, but first of all, who does that? Second of all,
I've done that once or twice. Just saying.
This guy. But and second of all, that we discussed, there are issues with LSD where you're running for a long distance, your stride degrades, and now you're grinding your hip and you're developing tendinitis. Well, you could avoid all of that, and you could go to the gym and start doing real weight bearing exercise. Big lifts, squat, deadlift. I mean, yeah, maybe this sounds a little scary, but it is a proven way to increase your bone density.
Indeed. And a lot of people out there are probably wondering, well, why don't I see older people at the gym?
Culture.
Yes, it is absolutely culture. One thing I think is super important to know is that the peak levels of strength in the human adult male are achievable between the ages of 35 and 50. And this is shocking to a lot of younger people, because we don't usually see very strong people who are between those ages. Maybe a few outliers like professional powerlifters or strongmen or whatever, but the average person between the ages of 35 and 50, I mean, picture it in your mind, especially if you're an American. What are you thinking of? Are you thinking of a super athlete? Probably not.
Guy with his pants a little too high. I mean, I think there are kind of two issues here. One is culture. As we get older, we're sort of not encouraged to be physical. And that creates a vicious cycle where you're non-physical, you get weaker, so you get less physical.
Indeed. As children, we're encouraged to play. In school, we're encouraged to do sports. In college, we're rewarded to an extent. Maybe we'll get a scholarship if we play football or whatever.
But then after that, nothing.
Yeah.
Now you're supposed to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. Who's kidding? I mean, if you're sitting at a desk, you're sitting at a desk for 10 hours a day, and you're not moving, and your lower back hurts, and your hips are tight, and then you're going to get up and walk to your car, and at no point have you gotten the physical activity you need to be healthy and happy. And then the other issue with older people not being in the gym is, guys, all that cardio you're doing, as a young person, you can recover from that cardio, and then you can do a couple barbell curls, and you're going to look okay. You're going to look good in the gym, and you're going to feel good. But as you get older, you can't recover from that cardio. and it's not building muscle mass. It's just keeping you lean, or maybe not even lean. It's creating a catabolic environment in your body so you can't build muscle. I would say ditch the running, do more strength training, look and feel great. One thing that moved me towards strength training, I'm about to make a big admission. I don't think you know this, Ramsey, but did I ever tell you that I've been doing yoga for about 17 years?
I don't think you have, but that would explain your incredible shoulder flexibility.
Okay. And
he's got super flexible shoulders,
which is necessary for a proper low bar squat.
Yeah.
If your shoulders don't feel like they're dying, the bar is not low enough. So, I did yoga for years because, basically I think I was good at it. And I thought, okay, I need to counteract all this sedentary office work with some physical activity, and yoga's sort of stretchy, so maybe it would counteract that. However, for those 17 years, I had lower back pain. Okay, sitting. I even got a standing desk. I got a standing desk, and my lower back pain turned into hip pain. Okay, so, I tried doing more yoga. I tried doing yin yoga. That's the super flexible yoga. And I tried doing ashtanga, which is like, I hate to say this, it's like cardio yoga. It's like long distance running yoga. It's horrible.
Man, there's every type of yoga now.
I know.
Yoga lattes.
Yoga lattes, exactly. And suffice to say, nothing helped. Well, what helped? What helped was getting some real core strength, because in yoga they say, okay, we're going to improve our core strength by, lifting our legs and tighten your core and balance on your sit bones. Okay, yeah, it's basically a body weight exercise with some stretching, and that's supposed to strengthen your core? No, you know what strengthens your core? Try to lift your freaking body weight, okay? Your core is going to have to be strong, okay? I remember a yoga teacher loved telling me, some, bodybuilders, they can't do this core work. And I gotta say, you know what? Let's get those bodybuilders into that yoga class, because I think they can do the core work,
And it's staggering how bad a rap bodybuilders get, because somebody heard something like, oh, well, bodybuilders aren't as strong as they look, because they're comparing bodybuilders to, say, strongmen competitors, or comparing bodybuilders to professional powerlifters.
If you compare a bodybuilder to someone who does yoga, there's going to be a massive difference in strength, output, and abilities right there. I know, that's like a mule standing next to a freaking front-end loader. I mean, they're going to be a lot stronger, and they'll be tighter. They will be tighter.
Even fitness models, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but a lot of my clients...
I hate that term, fitness model.
A lot of my clients who come to my gym to train with me in mixed martial arts are actually male fitness models. Now, this is kind of strange to me, because my whole concept of male fitness models before I moved here to China came from the movie Zoolander. So I just assumed it was this ridiculous thing. But what these guys do...
Do they have looks like Blue Steel, the Tigre?
Bro, I'm going to have to ask my friend Anush about that. Anyway, Anush Singh Duhan, he's a model from India, model/actor, super awesome guy, and also super athletic. Because all these guys do, when they are not posing for photographs or walking on the runway, they are working out, and they are super duper fit. Like my friend Anush, this model, beautiful man, beautiful face. He comes into the gym, and his whole goal was to learn martial arts in hopes of getting a shot at being an action star in Bollywood. And so he comes in, and we start grappling that day. And we grapple a little bit, and he comes over and says, "Coach, can you show me all the submissions?" And I said, there are literally hundreds of ways to make people tap out. And he's like, "Okay, I know, but can you just show me all of them right now?" And I said, there's no way you're going to remember them all. Maybe a detail. He's like, "No, just show me all of them, please." And so rapid fire, I showed him like 30 different ways to tap someone out, 30 different submission techniques. And he's like, "Okay, I got it." And I was like, "No, you don't. So we start grappling later that day.
And just works through them all.
And this guy's just beastly strong. super athletic, and he catches me with a straight ankle lock, which is a fairly complex move. I mean, you've got to catch your opponent's ankle at the right spot, at the right angle, under your arm. You've got to get the blade of your forearm right under the Achilles tendon. You've got to apply upward pressure. You've got to move your body in conjunction, which is very difficult for most beginners to do because they can't independently articulate their hips and combine that movement with their core and their abductors and all this stuff you have to do. But he actually caught me with a straight ankle lock. And I asked him, who taught you that? Where'd you learn that from? Because my initial thought was, this guy, he went to some jiu-jitsu school before, and he's here trying to show up the coach. And he's like, I learned that from you, coach. You just showed it to me a few minutes ago. I was like, no way. You're kidding me, right? He's like, I've never done this before. You remember? You showed it to me. I was like, man, this guy had a level of kinesthetic intelligence far above the average person. And I think a lot of that is the fact that he, like all these other fitness models, are simply much more physically active than the average person.
Well, and also they probably have better fitness genes. You
Yeah.
know, it's like with professional athletes. You know, people with good genes for this stuff are going to follow the money, you know. For example, my girlfriend, she looks fantastic. And, you know, she's sort of the body type that's being advertised. I mean, sort of hourglass figure, you know, slim arms and legs, you know, I mean, not, you know, no excess fat. I mean, this is the body type that is basically being sold to women, you know, so you come and buy some fitness training or you buy some classes, but it's genetic, you know, it's a genetic body type. I was in Korea this week, and I was working out at a gym there, and the personal trainers at this gym, I think, were quite typical for personal trainers. They were handsome people who were obviously genetically lean people. They did not have big muscles. You know, at least one of the female trainers had breast implants. I mean, it was this image that's being sold to you. This is what fitness is, you know, this is what you get from fitness. And you know what they were doing? The exercises they were doing? They had like people in their 20s and 30s taking 1 pound weights and doing stuff like this. I mean, it was just
moving
like
their arms up and down in a fairly non-functional fashion.
What the hell? I mean, it's just like, you know, not only are you wasting everybody's time and are you taking their money and you're not giving anything back, but as a business, if you waste your clients' time and money and they get no results from that, are they going to come back and buy more classes? I don't think so. Instead, they're going to, you know, oh, fitness doesn't work. I'll go back to the office and have a bubble tea, you know. So
I got to say, from the perspective of somebody who does private training with a lot of people come to me for personal fitness training. And that's great because I could use the money and all that. But, man, so many of them aren't really looking for a result as they are a feeling. Like
so
they want to feel a certain way.
So you do the thing where they throw up afterwards, right?
Yeah. I don't personally do that, but a lot of people are disappointed
But you
because I
could.
don't make them throw up afterwards because they're not super duper sore and dying the next day. Because I don't believe in that. I don't think that's a functional way to train. Now, I'm not saying don't ever be sore. I mean, I always wake up sore from what I was doing the next day, but not so sore that I can't get back in the gym and do it again and work again and learn something new and you know, just do my job essentially. But yeah, people are looking for a feeling, and so if they go to one of these gyms like Ned is describing, a lot of them they want that image, they want that they want something to believe in. It's almost like a religion in some ways.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, I can see that, you know, basically, you know, in a certain sense, your body should be something you can control. So, you know, there are a lot of things in life you can't, and why not try and control this, you know, your body. Well, the good news is you can control your body. You need to basically log your foods, weigh your foods, count your calories, count your macros, control your diet, you know, and then you need to have a training program. You know, you don't just go to the gym and think, oh, okay, I'm gonna just work out until I feel the burn.
Yeah.
You know, you can do that when you're in an untrained state. You can do that and you can get some results. But in 2 weeks, you're not going to get results. You're going to plateau, and then nothing's going to be changing for you, and you're going to get bored, and you're going to give up. So, I mean, I think that's one of the really valuable things that a trainer provides is not just are you helping people with their form and teaching them how to do the motions and the movements, you're helping them program their training.
Yeah.
You know, this cycle of adding stress to provoke an adaptation response.
Indeed. I'll tell you, one of the most important pieces of gym equipment that I ever bought for the gym was not the weights, although those are important and essential. Not the punching bags, not the boxing ring, none of that stuff. A whiteboard. A plain, simple whiteboard.
I use it every day.
Me too. Why the whiteboard? Because, well, that is where you write up your program. That is where you visually chart it. And after you're done, I always take a picture of that whiteboard to put in my notes,
Yep.
so that I can go back and compare and contrast and learn from what I did.
And you can also make little notes, because, like, for example, when I miss a rep, I make a little note, missed rep, maybe I got out of the groove, my balance was off, I couldn't make the rep or something.
Yeah.
Or often I write too hungry because, sometimes if you don't,
Oh man, I do that too.
Yeah, if you don't eat enough during the day, you hit your workout, you got to
Yeah.
do it because that's, you've only got time to do it then, but you haven't had enough calories, and, halfway through your workout, you're just, there's a hole in your stomach, and you cannot recruit your nervous system to give 100%. It's just not going to happen.
Same thing with your sleep schedule. If you are sleep deprived, you simply will not be as strong. You won't have the potential for strength like you would if you were well rested.
You'll also die earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about this with a cab driver today. So I read this book called Why We Sleep. It was kind of promoted on NPR, and I thought, oh, this will be great. In fact, I found it kind of a slog, but there's a lot of interesting information there. And one thing was that, if you look at Mediterranean cultures, or actually kind of pre-industrial cultures, you see that there's a siesta in the day because there's no
air all over Latin America, for example.
Yeah, there's no air conditioning in a lot of these sort of lower development areas. So at the middle of the day when it's hot, it's natural to just not move and sleep.
Especially if you eat the biggest meal in the middle of the day like they do in Argentina. Man, you're going to get really tired in mid-afternoon.
You need to sleep that off. So what happens? Basically, you look at mortality in these populations. People are living, into their 80s. They're relatively healthy. Heart disease is low. Then the same population undergoes industrialization. Now people are working these 9-to-5 schedules. People are working in offices. There's more air conditioning. There's more indoor lighting. What happens? Well, the first thing to go is the siesta. And when the siesta goes, your overall number of hours of sleep drop. And heart disease just takes a bump up. It just bumps right up. Okay. So basically, the less you sleep, the faster you die. Just going to leave that there. And the worse your recovery is going to be.
It's the truth, man. I've got 2 kids, and they take a nap every day. My 6-year-old says, I'm not tired, but she takes the nap anyway. And they have boundless energy.
And they're also like increasing in weight every, they like double in size every 3 days.
That's true. My kids are putting on muscle mass like crazy, faster than any bodybuilder ever can.
Totally. Yeah, you gotta get them doing getting the kinesthetic, chain going, like learning the movements.
Man, don't get me started on kinesthetic chains. Did you see the latest CrossFit self-defense debacle?
Oh no!
I've been contemplating making a video about this,
that.
but it's been done to death on
that.
the internet lately. So I don't know if I'll put my 2 cents in, but man, this guy, he's like, he's this CrossFit self-defense instructor, and I don't know why CrossFit has a
CrossFit
self-defense
Like,
department.
are you
but
protecting yourself from CrossFit? You know,
that would be valid
that would
CrossFit
be-
self-defense.
yeah, that would be like, no, I'm not going to jump on that box.
But essentially, he's got the medicine ball and he's throwing it up at the wall, and he's like, if you do 1,000 wall balls in a day, you have effectively thrown more power punches than a professional boxer. If you do a bunch of cleans, you're better at throwing elbows than a Muay Thai fighter, and so on. And if you put your seatbelt on in the car, that's essentially the same as throwing a lateral elbow like they do in Muay Thai. I'm like, what? And then he goes on saying, because it's the same kinetic chain. Now, I'm all for giving cues in lifting. For example, when Ned came to me for some advice on doing the clean where you pop your elbows up, I did give him the cue. You know, imagine you're throwing 2 elbow uppercuts under some guy's chin.
He said, imagine you're throwing it into your boss's face. And I nailed it.
Now, because it is a forceful movement, you
coming
are
for
lifting
you,
the
boss.
elbows, and
I'm
a lot of
coming for
people,
you.
when they do the clean, they don't realize they have to get the elbows up, and they drop them down here, and they drop the weight. But it's a great cue, but it's not the same movement as, you know, trading elbows and Muay Thai, not even close. But anyway, CrossFit self-defense, man.
I was attacked by a wall ball. Luckily, I knew how to throw a power punch, whatever that is. That sounds like very Power Rangers, like power
Doesn't it, though?
punch. Like it
Doesn't
charges up, you know.
It's over 9,000. I've never actually watched Dragon Ball Z. I've just heard that so much on the internet.
I saw the GIF, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of what I've got. I feel like we should maybe attack personal training next.
Oh yeah.
And then maybe fad diets.
Personal training and fad diets.
Paleo. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
eating like our ancestors supposedly did, and I don't like that term for a lot of reasons, because, you know, I'm very interested in the idea that humans are not from Earth, and I know this sounds.
Didn't know he was going to say this.
I know this sounds a little out there.
Me sitting here, it does not mean I agree with any of this.
And this has nothing to do with my religion or anything like that, which is a totally different thing. But I was reading these articles titled something along the lines of "Humans are not from this planet," and it cited a bunch of fairly plausible reasons why, because we're so different and whatnot. And
wait, we're so different?
Well, for example,
Then
humans, our circadian rhythms are on a 25-hour cycle. Earth has a 24-hour day. What's the deal there? So essentially,
but how come we're 99? Like our genetic material is like 99% the same as like a trilobite? I mean, like a little bug.
Well, because we're both living things with DNA. I mean, we're like 80% the same genetically as lettuce, and so. I mean, it's true. I know.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about your next fad diet, eat what lettuce eats. Sunlight and water.
Exactly. Sunlight and water. It's all natural. No preservatives. Totally vegan.
Sustainable.
As long as the sun shall shine. But anyway, I forget where I was going with
Depending
that.
on where you get your water from.
That whole idea of humans might not be from Earth. Oh yeah, the paleo diet. When people talk about our ancestors, we don't really know anything about ancient humans. Because, you know, human history, recorded history, is not that old. We have a few thousand years of written information about a handful of different cultures. I mean, we know a little bit about the Chinese from a few thousand years ago. We know a little bit about the ancient Egyptians. We know a little bit about the ancient Hebrews from the Bible. We know a little bit about the ancient Mesopotamians, and not much else besides that.
Yeah, and also we probably wrote down like really odd things because, I mean, I work in manufacturing, and part of this is, so we do something called ISO, and ISO basically means you write down what you do. Like, is there a process for, you know, packing a box? Well, we better have written instructions so that, you know, everyone packs the box the same way. ISO is the process of turning thinking human beings into automatons that run algorithms. It's the future. You either get on board or you go home. But doing this makes you realize that really we don't write anything down, and most of the things we do, we don't write down. And the things we do write down are like really odd things, like, oh, my dream journal,
Yeah.
So like, I mean, if you find an ancient Mesopotamian's dream journal, you're not really going to learn that much about his diet.
Indeed, and also the way we write things down, we're generally writing things down and also speaking, like doing a podcast right now, we're speaking to the present day audience.
Yeah.
And if you read an ancient text, they are speaking to their present day audience. For example, if you read the ancient Hebrew poetry from the Bible, for example, in the book of Psalms, we're removed from that, from like several different languages and several different cultures and centuries away, and it doesn't really make sense to a contemporary reader.
Can I ask you about that? Because I'm thinking of the Song of Songs right now. Okay, and so do you remember there's that poem where it's like, and her breasts are like two young lambs that play among the mountains? Because I always think of that line, and I'm like, never have I thought two young lambs. Never, it just doesn't occur.
The Song of Solomon in the Bible has so many references to breasts. For example, I forget which chapter. We have got a little sister, and her breasts are like towers, it says. This is in the Bible. And why they wrote that down, I don't know, because they were writing to a contemporary audience that spoke like that and thought like that and understood the context of what that meant. And we hear that in the modern day.
It just sounds like they were writing.
It sounds like weird, kinky pornography.
A bunch of bros who hang out with livestock.
I don't know, man. It's a different world. So if nobody writes like they're writing for a time capsule, like people of the future, this is what Earth was like back in my day. But making a podcast where it's both video and audio, it makes me think about this a little bit, because sometimes we'll describe stuff that's happening on the screen, and people listening to an audio version, there's no way they would understand that unless we're saying, all right, people listening to the audio-only version, this is what we are doing with our hands. I'm making air quotes with my fingers, for example. Or I have a picture, a visual right here. Let me describe it for you as if we're talking to a blind person. So
basically, to get back to the paleo diet, how the heck do you know what Paleolithic people ate?
We honestly don't know.
You don't. It is a fad, and eating nuts, like eating a bunch of nuts, that's like I'm just going to go ahead and say, I don't think that's a good idea. You should eat like 5 nuts a day. They're super high in fat. You don't need to eat a lot of nuts. Just a couple. And
I love nuts. I probably eat too many.
Well, you are a nut.
I'm going to die of nut poisoning.
Yeah.
But man, I'm a big fan of the idea of advanced ancient cultures who probably destroyed each other in some huge
like Atlantis,
cataclysmic
like
apocalyptic war of some kind.
Like, how come the Mesopotamian ziggurats look like the South American pyramids? And it's
exactly.
And it's like, well, if you stack pieces of stone on top of each other and you don't really have a building plan, it eventually turns into a ziggurat. Yeah, that's what you get.
Oh, come on, Ned, you just ruined my... All right.
Yeah. Or like, nobody knows how we could have made the pyramids. Like, ask an engineer, how would you make the pyramids? We don't even have the technology now. And the answer is, well, lots of slavery and probably tree trunks, and you roll things on them and hundreds of people are pushing a giant block. Also, no workplace safety, no OSHA.
There are like 3 guys down in the comment section right now saying, that's not how it happened, typing furiously.
They had spaceships.
I don't know. Like, I'm a big fan of entertaining this idea of advanced ancient civilizations. Maybe that was the case, maybe not. I think it's fun to think that we live in like this post-apocalyptic civilization, and we don't even know it.
Oh, like, did you ever read A Canticle for Leibowitz?
No, what's that about?
Oh, it's great. It's just what you're talking about. It's like, post-apocalyptic, they rediscover technology, bomb themselves back into the Stone Age, rediscover technology. It's like this cycle,
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That'd be pretty wild, though, if we found some ancient computers or something. We'd be like, whoa.
Well, the funny thing is, like, and as, we live in China, so we're seeing this in real time, but China's developed rapidly in the past 20 years, but it also ages rapidly. Like Chinese buildings, you look at, like we're looking out across the street at a building, and in the U.S. you'd be like, oh yeah, that building's probably 40 years old. I'm pretty sure it's maybe 10 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
And basically everything our society produces now is just gonna rust and blow away within like 50 years. Like, and the way we store information digitally, this is not a stable storage medium.
Digital information lasts at the most a couple decades, at the most.
Right. So
it needs to be replaced constantly.
So basically, if we all disappeared tomorrow, and our alien archaeologists are going through the rubble of Earth, what they're going to find is like the lambskin writings from the Middle Ages. And the castles. The castles will still be around.
They're going to find stuff made out of stone or etched in stone,
Right.
and they're going to think, oh, these were Paleolithic people
but then they
used stone tools.
Yeah, and then they might also find like a bunch of plastic, and they'll be like, well, this is weird. Does it grow here? Like, how did that happen? Yeah.
Man.
Good times.
What will the aliens think of us? What if we are the aliens? Going back to humans might not be from Earth.
I mean, I think
what if we are the aliens?
I think it'd be pretty convenient that like we're, our biology completely matches this alien environment.
Well, I mean, what if we are the Australia of outer space, for example? What I mean by that...
We just brought all our invasive species.
Yeah, I mean, Australia for a while was a British prison colony. They'd send the undesirables over there. And what if? What if, man? What if that's Earth? That's kind of a weird place. Marsupials are kind of like people, but not really.
We're the undesirables.
What if?
Or the descendants of the undesirables. I mean, you read human history and you're like, wow, these ancient people, they sounded pretty rough.
Man, like the ancient Assyrians, they would skin people alive and leave them to die out in the sun being eaten by the bugs.
Don't want to run into them in a dark alley, unless you know some MMA.
Oh, man. What is it with self-defense situations and dark alleys?
Well, throw that wall ball. That's 1,000 power punches.
You'll be better off than a pro boxer if you just do those CrossFit wall balls, my friends.
Put your seatbelt on. Take it off. That's a power elbow.
You never even have to test it live as long as you put your seatbelt on.
It'll take down many Assyrians. Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I am ready to go grill a grass-fed steak.
Man, I'm starving. All right, we're getting close to the 2-hour mark. I'd say that's great for a podcast. Too bad we don't have any super annoying outro music to add to this podcast.
We could try singing.
I'll give you a beat.
Yeah, that's right. Mumble, mumble, and don't run.
Yeah.
Just don't run. Lift weights, don't run.
Thanks for watching. Now, get out there and train.
Is that your...
That's my catchphrase.
Okay, yeah. Get out there. But do you do this? Like, what's that?
I don't know. Well, I do know because I've been living in China for so long.
Oh, yeah, that's the...
And I used to work at Shanghai Normal University.
But does it matter which hand you do? Like,
some people on the internet tell me that it does. I always use my right hand as the fist. I'm doing the Chinese palm fist salute here for the audio-only listeners.
This is sort of like
that thing you sometimes see in kung fu movies.
Respect.
They'll either do it like this or with the fingers over the top.
It's like very humble. It's like very humble to do
and
that. And
essentially, like, you won't see it a lot in big cities like Shanghai, but I had a lot of students at Shanghai Normal when I used to work there like 10 years ago from like these small farming communities that have very traditional Chinese values and whatnot. And they'd always say thank you with the palm fist salute. And so I would do thank you back. And when I started reffing, doing referee work here in China, I noticed the referees would always do the palm fist salute to salute the audience as soon as they walked in the cage.
Funny story.
And the fighters would do that as well. And
my dog does this too, and he's Chinese. He does this thing, and he does it when I say "gongxi gongxi," which is like "gongxi fa cai." It's like it's sort of a holiday greeting. It's like good luck and
I
get
actually
rich.
have seen dogs do the
Yeah.
palm fist salute.
And so he does that. That's
So
funny.
anyway, for the longest time, I thought it just meant thank you, and that is the way it's colloquially used. But I looked up the history of this on the internet because I got accused of cultural appropriation by some people on YouTube for doing the palm fist salute at the end of my videos, saying,
Well,
"Thanks for watching. Get
That's
out there
like
and train."
That's like the cheap house story, right? Like
Yeah.
some American woman.
Jeremy
wears a cheap
Lin,
house.
I think that was his name, Jeremy Lin or Jeremy Lim, one of those. He's this Chinese American guy. He sees this girl from Utah wearing a cheapao to her prom and starts crying, "Cultural appropriation. My culture is not your prom dress. Take it off. That's horrible.
My
I'm so offended."
culture is not your prom dress.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway,
you go to China and you're like, hey, what do you think about this? Oh yeah, that's cool. She's wearing a cheapao. Yeah. I mean, and also like the cheapao for a traditional garment, it is a sexy garment.
yes, it is with
Yeah.
slits all the way up the thigh, man.
All the way up. It's like
That's
you're
tight-fitting.
gonna wear that outside. Whoa.
Very tight-fitting dress before stretch fabric was ever invented. Man,
Phoenix collar, super hot.
indeed.
Yeah.
So if you want to dress up like a Chinese
Martial artist.
waitress wearing a cheapao or whatever, you have my approval. I'm not Chinese, but I live in the People's Republic of China.
I don't think. I mean, you only see a waitress wearing a cheapao in like a really fancy restaurant. You know,
Yeah.
that would be a fancy place. Yeah.
One of those places with the Lazy Susan turntable thing.
Yeah, like a Lazy Susan that's like the size of your house.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing has to weigh
It's
like,
those tables that turn around in a
100
circle so you can
pounds.
share your food. If there's a
and there'll be like
food on the other side of the
40
table you want, you just rotate
and
it
there'll be
till
like
it gets to you.
40 dishes, and everyone's sticking their chopsticks in, trying every dish. So, if you're coming to China, get that Hep B vaccine.
Mouth-borne illnesses, you don't want those. But anyway, I looked up the history of the palm fist salute, and the internet tells me, and I don't know if this is true because you can't believe everything on the internet, as my self-defense expose videos have taught me.
Except for the butt attack.
Except for the butt attack, exactly. Oh, man.
We need to
Have you
link
seen
to
that?
that. You have to link to that video.
Have you seen the video of the old Chinese kung fu master breaking rocks with his butt? Remind me to show you. He's like, like harnessing his chi or something, like, breathing really heavy.
And then
And there's a big old rock under him. Then he just like, drops his butt on it and it breaks in two. And it's amazing, man.
Gosh.
We really need to get a tech guy who can put the visuals up on the screen.
Yeah.
So,
I
man,
know.
if any of you watchers out there on your way to
Just
China, let me know.
Add that guy squatting on rocks.
Anyway, my third and possibly final attempt to give the history of the palm fist salute. So I looked it up on the internet, and it said that it is a symbol of a slave and a master. I know. And I was like, what? Slave and master? Like, why are they doing this? The fist representative of the slave and the palm covering it representative of the master. And essentially, you were saying, I am subservient to you when you do this to somebody else. Essentially saying, I am at your service, I am like your slave.
That is some Chinese politeness customs involve that. Like if you're at a banquet and someone wants to cheers with you, you actually put your cup a little bit lower. Like you do this, it's almost like a race to the bottom. You're both doing that.
The
but if you get it
furious race
lower,
to the bottom.
and
It's
then
real here.
And then you clink there, then it's like, okay, you're higher than me. It's just a thing they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating culture we live in here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the invitation, and I look forward to ranting about the paleo diet in
Let's do
more
it, man.
detail.
Let's do it. Let's rip paleo to shreds.
Gosh, we need some visuals. Like, how many nuts should you eat in a day? Ramsey says this many.
We should
Ned
go
says
old school on the
this
visuals
many.
and just bring pictures I can hold up in front of the screen since,
Right.
again,
Or
we don't have the tech guy who can patch it
bags
in.
of nuts.
And editing a 2-hour video in post on my iPhone, which I'm using to record all this, is I simply don't have the memory for it. So, visual aids next time. Let's make it a thing.
Okay, go.
The listeners at home on the audio version will appreciate that, I'm sure.
Right, go home and train.
Thanks for watching. Now, get out there and train.
Dude, awesome. That was super fun.